This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.
Welcome to Parliament TV.
Thank you so much.
As part of our mission as Parliament TV is to educate the public, could you take us through what the function and the responsibilities of the National Assembly Programming Committees are? I'm saying this because most of the things that take place in Parliament or activities of Parliament are discussed in these kind of meetings.
No, thank you, and good afternoon to the viewers. The Programming Committee, firstly, it is a structure of the National Assembly, and as the name suggests, it is there to ensure that the NA has a program to work with. And so it's there to look at the short-term issues, medium-term issues, and long-term issues. Now, when it comes to things like your program framework, which covers the whole year, you have a joint program committee, which is the committee of the program committee of the NA and the program committee of the NCOP. So it really looks at business that must be prioritized, business that comes out of committees of Parliament, and what should be done, and it programs that business to enable the House to conduct its business in a nutshell.
Yeah. And you are always in those meetings, the National Assembly Programming Committee meeting. Whenever there are procedural issues, you are called in to respond. Could you take us through what your roles and responsibilities are as the Secretary to the National Assembly?
Yes. Now, thank you. Even before I get to that, let me perhaps indicate who sits on that committee.
Yes.
The committee is chaired by the Speaker of the National Assembly. And of course, you have your most senior members of Parliament, what we refer to as chief whips, your whips generally, sit on the committee. And of course, you have other units within Parliament that assist the process, like your legal services, like your committee section, like your, of course, Bill's office is part of the legal services. So my role as I don't know how else to put it, as a chief advisor on matters of procedure, is to ensure that the committee, firstly, conducts its own business in terms of the rules, in terms of the Constitution, but it is also to ensure that any procedural questions that arise as a committee conducts its business are able to be dealt with in terms of the rules, one, of course, in terms of the Constitution, and any other law that is applicable in relation to the business of Parliament. So my role there really is to, working with a team, of course, of colleagues, procedural officers and advisors, is to advise that committee on matters to ensure that the business of Parliament is done correctly, let me put it that way.
Yeah, and you'll see usually when the House is sitting, you would have the table staff, members of the table staff sitting there, and sometimes wearing robes. Yes. What does it represent, and why do you have such kind of people sitting there? Is there a specific symbolism for that?
Look, I mean, there's a lot, in terms of why we have people sitting there, there's a lot of things that happen in the House. The time must be managed. speaking time for members. What we refer to as the speakers list, the list of speakers should also be managed. But also we're there not just to sit there, but to listen to what is being said. And so that in the event of a point of order or some things that are not meant to be said are said, and we are able to assist the House. If the chair has to rule on a matter, we must have listened to that and be able to say, Chair, this is what the member said, and this is what we advise, this is how we advise you should rule on the matter. So we are there as advisors in the House. Again, remember the House Parliament is governed by the Constitution. So even when it comes to the passing of laws or any business that the House conducts, it must do that in terms of the Constitution. So as advisors, we are there to ensure that the House is assisted in that regard, so that the business of the House is on the right side of procedure, on the right side of the law of the country.
Yeah. Now, coming back to the budget, the minister will table the budget usually around February after the State of the Nation. Well, we find ourselves under different circumstances this year where the budget had to be tabled at least 3 times. What are the key documents that the minister tables to Parliament? We just hear he tables the budget. Our focus as listeners or as citizens is on hearing how much will be allocated to which department. But he tables the budget, and there are documents that he hands over to Parliament. What are those?
So you would have your fiscal framework and revenue proposals, as the name suggests. It's about proposals in terms of revenue, the national revenue, and the fiscal framework, which is what informs the budget of the country. That is why even before you could deal with the division of revenue, you could deal with the appropriation bill itself, you had to deal first and foremost with the fiscal framework. In other words, there's agreement on the framework from the point of view of the fiscus.
Yeah.
And then you have the division of revenue, which deals with, of course, again, as the name suggests, divides revenue. Provinces are involved there as well. And then you have the appropriation bill, which really deals largely with appropriation at national level, where you have departmental appropriations. I think we have about 42, what we call them budget votes.
Yeah.
So when you talk about a budget vote, you're talking about the appropriation for that particular department. So it's budget vote, for instance, number 2, that's Parliament.
Yeah.
So that's the money that, in terms of the national revenue, is allocated to Parliament. And all the other departments would have their own own vote number.
Yeah.
And that's basically the money that is appropriated, that is allocated to that department. So that is the bill, that is the draft law that we are busy with at the moment, because until it is passed by both houses of Parliament, it remains a bill. Once it is passed by both houses of Parliament, then it becomes an act of Parliament, once ascended to by the President. So you let me know if I must pause. I can go on and on.
It's still fine. I think it's just to go back a bit. They are usually these
Instruments,
bills or these instruments. They are usually considered and passed in sequence.
Yeah.
So why is that important? Why do we have to pass the fiscal framework first, for instance, before we move on to the other instruments?
Yes, because fiscal framework must inform all these others, like a division of revenue and your appropriation bill. must fit within the framework, the fiscal framework of the country. And that is why you must first agree on the extent of this cake that we have. Yeah. And that is what the fiscal framework is really about. And then your division of revenue will fit into that as well, and your appropriations bill. So they must be done sequentially. So, yeah, I think I've answered your question.
Okay, and then once that is done, I wanted to ask what happens if it's not passed, but I think we can touch on that.
Yeah.
If the fiscal framework is not agreed to, what happens? But then once it's agreed to, we then move on to the next stage, which is the division of revenue bill. What does that division of revenue bill cover? I think you did touch on it a bit, but in detail, what does it cover?
I think maybe let me just start with the fiscal framework. If the fiscal framework is not passed, like it happened when it was passed, but there was a court settlement where the court encouraged the parties to settle on the matter, and we had to restart the process. And that answers the question, what if the fiscal framework is not passed? Because there was no agreed fiscal framework, we could not proceed to attend to the other aspects of the budget. And then of course you have the division of revenue, and I did say that the provinces are involved there, and so are the allocations for the provinces also contained in that division of revenue pool. And then you have the appropriation pool, which is where we are currently, what we are dealing with. So without preempting your point, so this week we'll be considering the appropriation bill. Now this bill would have been considered by various committees. So each committee would have dealt with its own appropriation. When I say its own appropriation, the appropriation attached to the portfolio of government. So if it is water and sanitation, the Committee on Water and Sanitation would have received a briefing from the department, your APP, annual performance plans, strategic plans, and any other input that it required from the department to enable it to consider that budget vote. So all the budget votes were referred to committees, and committees interacted with the respective state departments. And those budget votes were then debated in mini plenaries. Mini plenaries is a National Assembly meeting in like what we used to call extended committee. So like it's fewer members meeting together, and you can split those members into different mini plenaries. You can have up to 3 mini plenaries at a go to have a focused deliberation.
But their decisions are considered decisions of the House.
Now, they don't take decisions, mini plenaries. They deliberate on matters. And the matters dealt with in mini plenaries are then taken forward to the House for consideration by the House. So what you will have on Wednesday, and what we had last week, where the committee reports on these budget votes were then tabled before the House for consideration. And the House went through all those reports, and parties stated their positions on each of the reports. So what you then have on Wednesday is the whole appropriation bill now coming before the House, and the House will go through each of those votes. So typically what will happen is that the first thing that will happen is a report of the Appropriations Committee, which is I don't want to call it the super committee, but it is the committee that looks at that presents the bill to the House. It's not a super committee, but its function is to present the bill to the House to say, okay, House, this is the bill you referred to committees. We have now looked at this thing. We are now bringing it back to the House with a recommendation that could say, we agree to it, it must be passed, this bill, or we don't agree that it should be passed. But I understand that the committee has said the bill, it agrees to the bill, that the bill can now be passed by the House. So on Wednesday, the first thing that the House will do is to look at that report that says, we have looked at this task that you've given us, which is the bill, and our recommendation is that the bill must now be taken to the next step, which is consideration by the House, with the House agreeing to the bill. So the report of the committee will be considered as the first item in considering the budget on the day. And then the second item is a procedure that is applicable specifically to what we call money bills, like appropriations bill, where you have something called first reading of the bill. First reading is really about the House expressing itself on the principle of the law before it, of the bill before it. So you must go through that stage of the first reading. So there will be a debate on that, over an hour debate, and the House must decide on the first reading. Now the rules say, if the House does not agree on the first reading of the bill, then the bill will have been rejected. So if the House did not agree to that bill or does not agree on Wednesday, at that level already, before we get to the next levels, then the process will then stop, because that's what the rule says. But if the House agrees to the first reading of the bill, we then take it to the next step. You will stop me when you want me to pause.
And just to understand, what does the appropriation bill entail? Does it entail the reports from the various budget votes as well? Because I think I had you explaining that it's preferable for all the budget votes to be considered, all of them.
Sure.
Are they entailed in that bill?
Yeah. No, look, it's not preferable. It must be done.
Okay.
The reports on the budget votes have already been considered by the House. The reports, the different reports were considered last week by the House. So what you have on Wednesday is the bill itself, which contains the budget votes, the actual budget votes, the rands and cents, basically, the actual allocation. So the reports would have said, okay, this is what we think about this budget vote. But now on Wednesday is the actual is the actual appropriation itself, is the actual allocation itself to the departments that will serve before the House, with a report by the Appropriations Committee. Because the Appropriations Committee has looked at the whole bill and said, we are recommending that this bill must now be approved by the House. Maybe before we even get into the detail of that, there could have been another scenario where committees wanted to amend the different budget votes. Let's say Committee A says this budget vote number 3 should be amended. The rules say there must be interaction between that specific committee and the Appropriations Committee about the amendment or the proposed amendment, which must also involve the minister concerned, the minister of that portfolio, as well as the minister of finance. That could have happened. But that has not happened in this instance. But the law does allow Parliament to do that, to amend the appropriation bill and any other money bill. So back to Wednesday. So on Wednesday, after we have done the first reading, what we call the first reading, after the House has expressed itself on the principle of the law or the draft law before it and said, okay, we can now go ahead. We then take each of the votes individually. We'll start with vote number 1, which is the presidency. And parties will be allowed to declare their votes. What do we mean by declaring their votes? To state publicly how they are going to vote on this matter, on budget vote number 1. So there will be a time for each of the parties to state their position, and parties have been allocated time. There's global time, and each of the party, proportionally, time has been allocated. So the parties, for all these votes, they will use that time that has been allocated. So they then declare on vote 1. After declaring on vote 1, the vote is then put to the House for decision.
Okay.
House, do you agree that vote number 1 must be passed? They can say, yes, we agree. Or they can say, no, we object, but that's how far it goes. We just object. And then the House will then say, okay, we note the objection of party A or party B. The vote number 1 has been agreed to. Or a party will say, we call for a division, which is the strongest form of disagreeing, with the instrument before the House. Yeah. We call for a division, then there's voting, then numbers come in. So many numbers of this party vote against or vote for. And so it's going to be like that up to the point you get to vote number 42. Now, we have said in the program committee, you may have followed this part, that if there is disagreement on 2 or 3 of the votes, or even on 1 of the votes, the House will go through all the votes. But at that stage, once it completes the votes, it must then refer the bill back to the committee. Because remember, it would have passed the 2 hurdles, which is the committee report and the first reading. So if it's at this point, there is a vote that is not passed that does not secure the majority of the members, the numbers, then we're saying that the bill must now be referred back to the committee on appropriations for reconsideration.
Okay.
And of course, the House or the Speaker will say to the committee how much time they must take to consider the matter. That is in the unlikely event that any of the votes is agreed to.
Is it unlikely though? I'm saying this because there were clear objections from different parties in the National Assembly on certain votes. They would say explicitly that we're not going to vote for so and so, budget vote so and so. And should it happen that they do not, they win, those who disagree win. What then happens? I know you're saying they will be referred back to the committee, but considering that Parliament has a timeline within which it must conclude the budget process, and I think in this case it's by the 23rd of July.
No, it's by the end of July.
End of July. What then happens?
If there's no agreement?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, if there's
on 1 or 2 of the budget votes.
If there's no agreement on 1 or 2 of the votes, we'll still go through all the votes, and then the bill itself will then be referred back to the committee on appropriations for reconsideration. And I indicated that the Speaker will then indicate how much time that committee will have to reconsider the bill.
Yeah.
And I cannot speculate how Speaker will approach that matter. And then the committee must report back to the House. But my sense is that everyone recognizes that this is an urgent matter.
Yeah.
So I think the urgency of the matter will be taken into account in allocating the time to the committee. So then it reports back, and let us say then it's passed by the House. We then go to what we call the whole schedule that is put to the House for decision. Once the schedule is put, then we go to what we call the second reading of the bill. We have done the first reading. Second reading of the bill, then the bill is passed. But because this is educational.
But what's the purpose of that second reading?
It's basically parliamentary terminology. and parliamentary practice. But the second reading is basically to say you are taking the final decision on the bill. There's a final decision that you are taking on the bill. So if that decision is not agreed to, you don't secure enough numbers, then the bill is considered rejected. It must be resubmitted.
And there are timelines, I understand, for a bill to be presented to Parliament within a space, I think, is it within a year? Or?
No, look, the rule says a bill of the same substance may not be introduced in Parliament in the same annual session except by leave of the House.
Okay, meaning...
So there is an exception there, meaning that the House can resolve to say that in this circumstance, the bill must be resubmitted to the House. Okay. So these rules are developed by the House, and the House can decide in specific instances to say, okay, under these circumstances, we move a motion that this rule be suspended to enable a particular process to happen. So that is the exception the rule creates, that while there is this prohibition, but there could be this exception where the House says, all right, we agree that this bill must be reintroduced.
Would the exception also cover an instance where we don't make it to the end of July and that timeline would have lapsed? What then happens? Are government departments able to continue spending, and how much of the budget can they continue spending legally?
Yeah, look, the law says is PFMA, Public Finance Management Act, that for the first 4 months before the budget is passed, which is from April, May, June, July, 45% of the budget appropriated in the previous year can be utilized by the different government departments.
Okay.
But once you get to the 4th month, beyond that 4th month, the law says, that same law says, you can then utilize 10% of the budget that was appropriated in the previous financial year. So as you can see, the resources would be limited in terms of what can be covered by those resources. Yeah. So it is important that the budget is passed so that there would be service delivery, and the state would be able to meet its obligations towards the electorate.
You know, when political parties talk, even within parliamentary platforms, sometimes outside as well, there are alarm bells ringing that if Parliament fails to pass this budget by end of July, it would mean that service delivery will collapse. That's one. Two, it would mean that effectively government will have to be dissolved. Are there any provisions for such instances?
No, there aren't such provisions. The provision that we have is a constitutional provision that says the dissolution of Parliament could only occur after 3 years has lapsed, or 3 years have lapsed. So there is no such provision. We don't have such a system here in the country.
Okay, so those fears can be allayed.
Well, I mean, I'm speaking technically from the point of view of what the law provides. So I cannot speculate on whether on how parties will take the matter forward, but that's what the law provides.
Okay. So the Constitution requires Parliament to pass the appropriation bill within 4 months. We've touched on that. It means by end of July, it must be passed. But you've said Parliament can resolve, can agree on how to move forward.
Yeah, look,
Yeah, I want to check, like,
Sure.
are there timelines? We don't want to preempt the time that the Speaker would give the committee if they were to go back and, in an instance where the committee has to relook at the bill, but also in an instance where the bill is completely rejected. What timelines would Parliament have to resolve that, considering that government will only be functioning at 10% of the budget?
Sure. I think the first point maybe to clarify is that the July thing does not come from the Constitution. It comes from the law,
Okay.
from the Money Act, among others. Secondly, Parliament cannot suspend a law. So the rules of Parliament cannot suspend a law. So the 4 months will take effect. I mean, the 4 months, the end of July, will take effect. Parliament, in its own wisdom, will decide how much time it must give to the different structures that must deal with this, because the budget, it's not just the NA that is involved in this process. You have the NA. From the NA, it must still go to the NCOP. So clearly, time is not on our side, but Parliament, in its own wisdom, will decide how to handle that process. But what is clear is that whatever that shall be done will be urgent in the process. Yeah.
Yeah, we've seen Parliament in its wisdom being able to navigate those uncharted
A lot of difficult times.
waters. Yeah. Once the budget is passed, how does Parliament continue to play its oversight role and overseeing how funds are spent, and what tools does it use to, how do I put it, to hold departments accountable for their spending?
Yeah. I mean, as we know, Parliament largely functions through the NA through portfolio committees, NCOP through select committees.
Yeah.
And you've got standing committees as well, like on the Auditor General, on Appropriations, on Finance. So those committees must be involved in monitoring the expenditure of the state and checking whether these resources are being spent in terms of the plans, strategic plans, the annual performance plans. As you know very well, there is a planning stage, there's a legislative stage in the budget process, and then there's a time when there must be monitoring, there must be evaluation, and committees of Parliament come to play a role in the process of exercising that oversight. You also have annual reports that must be tabled in Parliament at the end of September, which Parliament will use as a tool in conducting oversight over state departments. The money, what we refer to as the Money Act, the act that enables Parliament to amend the budget, makes provision for what is called budgetary review and recommendation reports. So that is when the committees of Parliament scrutinize the expenditure of government, how resources were used, and how departments intend to use resources. So it looks at past and present and future performance of departments. And in doing that, it would also look at the annual reports of departments and various other instruments that the departments would have that would enable Parliament to assess their performance. And so those reports are then tabled in Parliament, and the law says they must be tabled before the adjustments appropriation process, which happens generally around October, so that when the Minister of Finance then tables the next budget, they would have taken account of the recommendations of committees in the what we call BRRs, the budgetary review and recommendation reports. So you see a cycle here.
Yeah.
The process of oversight is ongoing. It's not a where there's a beginning and there's an end.
Yeah.
No. You deal with this budget, you must do the adjustments, there's continuous oversight. So even the State of the Nation address is a mechanism to give account to Parliament on how the state has performed. After that, and of course commitments are made during the State of the Nation address, and the Minister of Finance must then give effect to some of the commitments made during the State of the Nation address, and then Parliament must then exercise oversight over that budget, scrutinize that budget proposals, not just the budget proposals, but some of the commitments made in the State of the Nation address. Because some of the commitments, or most, if not all, will relate to different government portfolios which are managed by government departments. So Parliament must then exercise oversight even over that as well until the end of the parliamentary period, which is a 5-year period.
Yeah, you touched on the medium-term budget policy statement. That would be my next question. I wanted to ask how it relates to this budget process in so far as oversight is concerned.
So I mean, all those instruments they come into this. So committees of Parliament must continue to exercise oversight over all of this.
Yeah. So finally, whether or not the revised budget is adopted on Wednesday, Parliament has learned some key lessons from this year's process. I mean, the budget had to be revised, tabled again, revised and tabled again the third time. What legal gaps or grey areas have been identified, and what steps are being considered to improve and strengthen in the process for future purposes?
Look, I guess it's still early to make a pronouncement on that. We have not. Remember, we're not beyond the budget process just yet. So I will really be speculating. We must still do a proper analysis of some of the challenges, whether we look at them, whether they are technical or political challenges. As you know, we are people who work with technical issues, procedural legal issues. So if we establish that some of the issues were of a legal or procedural nature and they can be managed, of course we'll make those proposals. But it would be premature of me to pronounce on those. The institution led by the Secretary to Parliament must still deal with that matter. I mean, because there's no one unit that deals with these processes. You would have procedural, legal, and other units that play a part. So a proper evaluation of what has obtained in this process must still be conducted.
Okay. Before I let you go, Mr. Xaso, two committee chairpersons, our committees, parliamentary committees, deal with complex matters, and it's always important to have people who are well versed on issues. So two of our committee chairpersons were conferred their PhDs today. We now have Dr. Musimaimane and Dr. Malusi Gigaba. What would you say to them? A congratulatory message, perhaps?
Yeah, well, I would say congratulations, well done. We're learning, we're inspired by that. But also, Parliament is privileged to have such people who are in leadership positions, and I mean, as you said, committee chairpersons. So I'm happy for them. I was not aware. I've not read the newspapers yet. I've not followed the news yet because I was in a meeting the whole day. But yeah, I'm really I am happy for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Xaso, for making time to be with us today.
Sure, pleasure.
And that's where we leave it for today, and we are very thankful to Mr. Masibulele Xaso, the Secretary to the National Assembly, for shedding light on Parliament's budget process. My name is Shihlamari Songobeni, and it's good night.
This book, our Constitution, protects our society and empowers us to govern. The Protea leaves are us, the people, who freely elect our voices in Parliament. The drum calls the people of Parliament, through whom we govern together. And the sun is our country, healing our past, improving our lives, and energizing our potential. Together, our Constitution, our people, our Parliament, and our country are building our great South African nation. Parliament TV, Channel 408 on DSTV.